thing we've got to do around here is vote. And we've got a lot of people down there doing the second vote right now. But we do want to, I know you all are busy, and there's just so much going on right now as we wrap up this week. So I think we're going to go ahead and get started. It's my privilege to call the hearing to order. I thank my colleagues for joining us and the witnesses before us taking the time to be here today. Today we will consider three perspectives from expert witnesses regarding the need to reauthorize critical components of the U.S. Grain Standards Act, which are set to expire at the end of September. From farmers to consumers, our nation's partners, our nation's agriculture system relies on the critical weighing and inspection services provided by the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Federal Grain Inspection Service and partner agencies across the country. These services facilitate the timely marketing of high-quality U.S. grain into the global marketplace and help set the U.S. apart as a trusted, consistent, and reliable source for the world's grain needs. Mr. Friant, Ms. Mickish, and Mr. Wipfa, I get that right? Wipf.
One syllable.
Well, you're like me. You're used to be called everything. Wipf. Your testimony today will help inform us how we can best proceed. We appreciate the engagement from you and your organizations. As I always say, the best ideas come from the ground up. We'll also be working with USDA to ensure our farmers and the grain value chain continue to receive quality service, and that USDA has the authority and flexibility it needs to adequately respond to any issue that may arise. I look forward to working with Ranking Member Klobuchar, members of this committee, and the stakeholders who depend on the U.S. grain standards functioning properly to ensure a timely, productive, and bipartisan reauthorization of this act. Thank you all again for being here today. As I said, Senator Klobuchar will be with us in just a little bit. And so, we will go ahead, though, and proceed with our introductions. Yeah. We were just about to introduce Mr. Friant, and so I think you're going to do that for us.
All right. I'm going to just a few words. So sorry I'm late, but we were doing our caucus event, and I also going to have to leave a little early, but I'm really excited that you're having this hearing, Mr. Chairman, and to focus on the grain inspection system. And I'd especially like to welcome Mr. Nick Friant from Chanhassen, Minnesota. He is joined here today by his daughter, Clara, as well. Where are you, Clara? Right back there. Thank you. Good school experience there to bring home. What did she say? It's pretty good. Yeah, exactly. Before we begin, I'd like to underscore how damaging USDA's recently announced reorganization could be to American agriculture. I truly appreciate that Senator Boozman is having a hearing, and we're going to hear from the Deputy Secretary tomorrow because we had little analysis, zero consultation. But amid all of this, a hearing on grain standards may seem unusual, but this statute and the services provided by the Federal Grain Inspection Service serve as a critical role in the U.S. and global marketplace for grains and oilseeds, and we've had bipartisan support for working on this issue in the past and plan to have that keep happening in the future. Any lapse in this authority, which is set to expire at the end of September, will only create more uncertainty for farmers. Though the Grain Standards Act was first enacted in 1916, the current grain inspection system was born out of the 1970s, when the credibility of U.S. agricultural exports was seriously called into question following a series of scandals in the private inspection system. While American farmers were producing high-quality grain, private individuals and companies tasked with inspection were shortchanging customers abroad through intentional misgrading, inaccurately weighing grain, and even bribery that led to several federal indictments and convictions. Following those events, Congress created the Federal Grain Inspection System to return integrity to the U.S. brand. The official USDA Certificate of Inspection and Weighing helps ensure American farmers are getting a fair price and guarantees international customers can trust the products they are buying, whether it's from Minnesota with our soybeans or rice from Arkansas. Like that. Just a little name dropping your state. Since this time, with various periodic updates, the trust associated with the certificate has become the gold standard for international customers and has made American farmers the premier suppliers of high-quality grains and oilseeds. And these export markets have been a bright spot in our economy in recent decades. And with all the uncertainty going on with tariffs, it is more important than ever that we maintain the integrity of our grain inspection system today. And I look forward to working with you, Mr. Chairman, to do just that as we begin to work together in a bipartisan way to reauthorize the legislation.
Very much. I'm going to go ahead and introduce Mrs. Kia Mikish, and Senator Hoven will be along at some point. He's busy working hard to get the ag bill so that we can discuss it and hopefully get it voted out this week. She brings a wealth of knowledge and experience to the committee today. A North Dakota native, Mrs. Mikish is the third generation of her family's agriculture inspection and testing service. Her upbringing in the grain inspection field has continued to make her an asset to several industry organizations, including her current roles as president of AGAWA and vice president of North Dakota Grain Inspection. She's also chair of USDA's FGIS Advisory Committee. Mrs. Mikish's in-depth industry understanding and leadership make her a fantastic representative of the grain sector as we look to fine-tune FGIS. I'm grateful to Mrs. Mikish's willingness to share her testimony today. Finally, we are going to, I'm going to go ahead and introduce Mr. Whip. Mr. Whip. Again, same situation with Senator Thune. He's busy running the place. And he's one of our most active members. Mr. Whiff manages a soybean, corn, and wheat farm with his wife and parents in South Dakota. I think your wife is with us, isn't she? Very good. It's good to have you here. Upon graduation from Dort, from Dort University in Iowa, he returned to the farm and led their family business in expanding to add alfalfa. Go ahead, John. I just told him that you were busy running the place.
But not too busy for a grain inspection hearing.
Yeah, that's right. Of all the super exciting topics we get to deal with here, but it's an important one. Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member Klobuchar, for having today's hearing. I appreciate the chance, as always, to serve on this committee and to advocate on behalf of South Dakota's farmers and ranchers. And production agriculture is so important to our state. It's our #1 industry, and we're very blessed to have people represented like Brandon Whiff. So nice to have you here. Had an opportunity. He was in town with the South Dakota Soybean Association and growers here just a few weeks ago, and thanks for again making the trip out to DC and representing our state soybean growers. I think, as you were starting to say, Mr. Chairman, he served on the American Soybean Association board since 2017. held an appointment to the CFTC Ag Advisory Council, has spoken in support of U.S. agricultural trade on multiple continents, and most recently appointed by Governor Larry Roden to a vacancy on the South Dakota, I should say, State Senate. So again, welcome, Brandon. Good to have you here. And I think they raise about 1,200 acres of soybeans, and on top of that, some corn and wheat, among other things, with his family. And I think engineer by training, correct? And but making a difference on so many levels in South Dakota agriculture and for the future of our state and country. So, Brandon, welcome back, and we'll look forward to hearing from you and our other panelists today too, on a subject that has great importance and relevance to our state and to a lot of states across the country. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bryant, you're recognized for a testimony.
Chairman Boozman, Ranking Member Klobuchar, and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today to provide the perspective of the National Grain and Feed Association on reauthorizing the U.S. Grain Standards Act. I am Nick Bryant, Director of Raw Material Quality and Regulatory at Cargill and Chairman of NGFA's Grain Grades and Weights Committee. Cargill is proud to be a longtime participant in the U.S. grain export system and member of NGFA. Since 1896, NGFA has represented grain industry members that operate more than 8,000 facilities. This includes farmer-owned cooperatives and multinational grain exporters. Together, we rely on a strong, consistent, and transparent official inspection and weighing system to deliver confidence and value across the global supply chain. We urge Congress to reauthorize the U.S. Grain Standards Act in a timely and bipartisan manner. Doing so will provide certainty to farmers, grain handlers, and international customers who depend on the integrity of the U.S. official grain inspection system. I want to focus on two core issues that are top priorities for our industry in this reauthorization. First, investment in grain grading technology to speed and improve the inspection process, and second, strengthening the emergency waiver authority to ensure continuity and flexibility in grain export inspection services. The U.S. grain inspection system has long set a global benchmark for quality and reliability. While the basic framework of grain standards has remained stable over time, the international grain market has become increasingly competitive. Thus, our inspection and grading systems must evolve accordingly. Today, FGIS still relies on legacy technologies for determining grade factors that ultimately influence a commodity's value and fungibility. FGIS must prioritize research, development, and validation of modern grain grading technologies that improve accuracy, speed, and consistency. The agency should actively collaborate with industry and academia to identify innovative tools that can reduce human error and improve grading objectivity. Furthermore, we believe that new technologies can help the agency drive efficiencies, reduce costs, and address the staffing challenges it faces, all of which ultimately benefit U.S. farmers, agribusinesses, and rural economies. We believe the USDA should allocate dedicated resources, both staff and funding, to expedite this process. NGFA and its members are ready and willing to partner with USDA and FGIS to pilot and implement new technologies, provided there is a clear pathway for scientific validation, standardization, and eventual deployment. Therefore, we have worked with our partners at AGWA and the American Soybean Association on language for the U.S. Grain Standards Reauthorization Act that will provide FGIS with the necessary tools to focus their resources on this important issue. We encourage the committee to approve the proposal. The second central area we encourage Congress to address is the need for enhanced flexibility in issuing emergency waivers of official inspection requirements during service disruptions. The 2015 reauthorization wisely included provisions requiring FGIS to act transparently when official services are disrupted at export ports. Let me be clear. The U.S. industry strongly supports the requirement for mandatory official inspection and weighing of export grain. It is fundamental to preserving market integrity and the credibility of our supply chain. But during natural disasters or other force majeure events, or in rare instances where buyers and sellers mutually agree to waive inspection due to service disruptions, the Act must allow for pragmatic flexibility. We recommend that Congress revise the Act to clarify the definition of emergency and authorize FGIS to issue conditional waivers. Further, the waiver would be applied provided that the buyer and seller voluntarily agree, The absence of an official inspection does not impair the transaction, and such a waiver would not undermine the objectives of the Act. Establishing a transparent and predictable contingency plan for future disruptions would provide exporters, importers, and customers with the confidence that the flow of U.S. grain can continue during unexpected challenges without compromising the overall integrity of the system. While I have highlighted two core priorities we are ready to discuss other elements of the Act, including advisory committee functionality, clarifying the use of user fees, and user fee cap reform. The U.S. grain inspection system is a foundation of our country's reputation as a reliable agricultural supplier. Timely reauthorization of the U.S. Grain Standards Act, combined with the enhancements we've outlined today, will ensure that our inspection system continues to meet the high expectation of U.S. producers and our global customers. As chairman of the NGFA's Grain Grades and Weights Committee, and on behalf of Cargill and the broader industry, I would like to express my sincere appreciation for your oversight and bipartisan leadership on this issue. We look forward to working with you to modernize and strengthen this vital act. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today, and I'll welcome your questions.
Thank you. Mrs. Mishkish.
Good morning. Thank you, Chairman Boozman and Ranking Member Klobuchar, for prioritizing this important issue and working together to hold this bipartisan hearing. My name is Kia Mikish, and I am privileged to serve as the president of the American Association of Grain Inspection and Weighing Agencies. I am also the vice president of North Dakota Grain Inspection, the third generation of my family to help lead the business. AGWA's members are agencies delegated and designated by USDA's Federal Grain Inspection Service to weigh and inspect the nation's grain. From the public agencies such as the State Departments of Agriculture of Washington and Alabama to private agencies like my own, AGWA's members work alongside USDA's FGIS to provide essential support to the agricultural economy. The U.S. Grain Standards Act authorizes this unique public-private partnership to carry out its uniform standards and export grain inspection mandate. While FGIS and certain state agencies weigh and inspect every load of grain on an export vessel, state and private agencies will conduct 9 times as many inspections before grain ever reaches port. At all hours of the day and night, our inspectors are at rail yards, grain elevators, and in the lab. But yes, we work to maintain trust in U.S. grain contracts, but we're also testing for toxins harmful to Americans and our livestock herds. The export inspection mandate underlies official inspection, but it also allows a uniform voluntary inspection system to provide trust in U.S. grain, no matter whether it is destined for export or for domestic feed, food, or biofuels production. The significance of this system might not be obvious, but it helps explain why America remains the world's leading agricultural exporter. Before the 1976 Act, our grain markets were inefficient, even chaotic. Markets did not trust U.S. grades and weights, which meant that producers and agribusinesses earned lower prices abroad than their grain was really worth. Today, thanks to official inspection, U.S. grain standards and quality are the gold standard of the world. Buyers will pay a premium for American grain, giving our farmers and exporters a critical competitive edge. American standards are the universal reference for grain contracts. Even transactions that never touch our country rely on them. Our system is so successful that changes to the Act should always be weighed very cautiously, but the committee should also know that cracks are beginning to show, and maintenance is required. Grain inspection has relied on the same basic technology for 100 years. As the egg supply chain has become more efficient, inspection remains reliant on an ever-shrinking pool of highly trained human inspectors. It's time and personnel intensive. The lack of technological advancement is creating unnecessary costs to taxpayers, exporters, producers, and our own agencies. We have become the bottleneck. Without new technology, the consequences could be stark. The rigorous standards that were yesterday's privilege will be tomorrow's burden, simply because we lack modern tools to implement them efficiently. On the other hand, the efficiencies reaped by grain inspection technology would reduce costs in the food supply chain and the direct costs to taxpayers of maintaining the inspection system. The barriers to new technology reflect the fact that FGIS and official agencies have a near monopoly on the data and expertise necessary to develop technology, but we are not R&D agencies nor venture capitalists. We need to be able to work flexibly with the private sector to find solutions to our unique problems and foster the conditions necessary for investors to take risks in our field. FGIS's dedicated staff have made a heroic effort to advance technology, but they need more than resources. They need flexibility that reflects the realities of the unusual small market for inspection technology. I urge the committee to reauthorize the act with a small, modest toolbox of new authorities for FGIS to speed technology development. Specifically, Congress should clarify in the statute that FGIS may leverage official agencies for R&D, provide other transactions authority for inspection technology research and development, and establish a modest, dedicated funding account through user fees and appropriations to support the evaluation and deployment of new technology. With these tools, FGIS can coordinate flexible partnerships with research institutions, technology developers, official agencies, and the grain trade, so that promising technologies can be developed outside government, validated in the real world, and approved quickly once they reach FGIS. This reauthorization is an opportunity to modernize the most trusted inspection system in the world, ensuring it remains competitive, cost-effective, and resilient. I want to thank the committee for recognizing the urgency of this issue and for your ongoing support of American agriculture and the inspection system that underpins it. I look forward to your questions.
Mr. Whiff.
Good afternoon, Chairman Boozman, Ranking Member Klobuchar, and distinguished members of the Senate Committee on Agriculture. It's an honor to join you today to testify on behalf of the American Soybean Association regarding this committee's review of the U.S. Grain Standards Act. My name is Brandon Whipp, and I'm a soybean farmer from South Dakota. I also have the privilege of serving on the board of directors of ASA, which represents over 500,000 U.S. soybean farmers across the 30 main soy-producing states. Soybeans are the largest ag export in the U.S., and robust international trade is a priority for our industry. Market access and relationship maintenance would not be possible were it not for the trusted and reliable grain inspection and marketing efforts undertaken by the Agricultural Marketing Services Federal Grain Inspection Service as authorized by the U.S. Grain Standards Act. For most soybean farmers, our main interaction with FGIS, its designated or delegated agencies, and the U.S. grain standards are at our local grain elevator. When I deliver my soybeans to the elevator, they are tested, sorted, and consolidated into larger lots for eventual shipment. The grain standards determine the price a farmer like me receives for their soybeans at the elevator, and I know the official grain grades provide our international customers with the knowledge that the commodities they receive have been assessed for quality, purity, moisture, and soundness. Recently, the industry conducted a series of conversations with stakeholders across the soybean sector, including farmers, inspectors, regulators, exporters, and international buyers about the value and perception of FGIS and the U.S. grain standards. While the full results of these conversations are still being evaluated, initial feedback shows that the value of the U.S. grain standards and federal inspection is extremely high for the soybean export value chain and for our international customers. Global customers consider FGIS to be the gold standard for grain grading. Inspections carry the weight of the U.S. government, creating peace of mind for international customers and providing impartiality that private inspections may lack. Additionally, the standards are simple, and customers rely on that simplicity to mitigate risk. The ability to effectively hedge through futures markets is a key differentiator for U.S. origin soybeans. The long-standing simplicity and consistency of U.S. grain standards have allowed for the development of extensive futures and derivatives markets for U.S. products that promote true price discovery. The U.S. soybean industry has a strong relationship with FGIS, and when issues arise, we can address them in a manner that meets the needs of U.S. farmers while maintaining the integrity of those standards. Most recently, the U.S. soy industry worked with FGIS to review and remove soybeans of other color, or SBOC, as an official grade determining factor under the U.S. standard for soybeans. This was due to a rising occurrence of SBOC resulting from a new soybean seed variety that had a tendency to produce off-color seed coats. This had no impact on the soybeans' protein, oil content, or quality, but farmers like me were being penalized because of the seed coat's color. In response to rising levels of SBOC, FGIS conducted a study on the functionality of protein and oil content of soybean samples containing varying amounts of SBOC. The results found no significant differences in the protein or oil content as compared to samples not containing this phenomenon. However, marketing concerns did remain, and FGIS took multiple meetings with industry, solicited feedback, and provided a notice of proposed rulemaking to remove SBOC from the U.S. standard for soybeans. In July 2023, a final rule was issued removing SBOC as a grade determining factor for U.S. soybeans, a win for soybean farmers and an example of industry collaboration. Changing the standard for soybeans benefited farmers, exporters, and international customers by providing additional clarity and ensuring our trading partners knew that no matter what, they were still receiving the soybeans that they required. Reauthorization of the U.S. Grain Standards Act is vital for the continued success of U.S. soy in the international marketplace. On behalf of ASA, I thank the committee for their timely attention to the expiring provisions of the U.S. Grain Standards Act. We appreciate the opportunity to share the importance of the FGIS system and look forward to working with this committee to reauthorize the Grain Standards Act this year. Thank you, Senators, and I look forward to your questions.
Leader Thune.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be very brief. We've got other members here who want to ask questions, but if I could just say, I think we all recognize the importance of promoting U.S. agriculture on the world stage, which is why we must use every available tool to facilitate international trade to support farmers, grain processors, and exporters. And as the United States engages and continues to engage in negotiations with our trading partners, we need to ensure that U.S. grains are seen as reliable and high-quality product by foreign buyers. And the Federal Grain Inspection Service works to maintain these standards so that our grain remains a reliable purchasing option. So, Mr. Whiff, could you maybe just explain, in your view, what impact on soybean markets in South Dakota and across the country would happen if the Grain Standards Act is allowed to expire?
Well, customers that buy from us do so under the auspices of these rules, and if those are allowed to lapse or if the funding for them is compromised, I think it would compromise the confidence that international buyers have in what they're purchasing from us. So yeah. we urge a timely
reauthorization.
Yes.
Okay, all right. Very follow-up to anybody on the panel, but by providing impartial inspections and weighing services, FGIS has created a transparent, trustworthy system. I think we all agree that. That system reduces the chances of price disparity and eliminates quality discrepancies. So how have, and I'd say this to all of you, you seen the Federal Grain Inspection Service contribute to global grain price discovery, and what would be the potential consequences for international markets if FGIS services lapsed?
Well, you know, uncertainty is kind of a way of life in agriculture when you depend on the weather, but we try to do everything we can to remove as much uncertainty as we can, and we also understand those are the same priorities for our international buyers. And so anytime you buy anything from a shirt to a car to a cargo of soybeans, you want to know what you're paying and what you're getting for it. And if you know both of those things, I think you have a very good relationship. And so these rules are imperative to the continuation of our good relationships abroad.
Okay. Others? No. Ms. Meckish.
As part of my position, I work a lot with different associations to host trade groups that are coming over from all across the globe. And part of my presentation is going over what actually is the official grain inspection and the services that we do. What we do is unlike anywhere else in the world. And after I'm done with this hour-long presentation, the sparkle in their eyes, I know that sounds crazy, but they get so excited to buy our grain, and the assurances that they are going to receive what it is that they're paying for, and they are always extremely impressed by what our system is.
Perfect, thank you. Mr. Bryant.
And I think, Senator, we've heard a couple times in the testimonies and in your remarks, the international buyer holds that USDA certificate as the gold standard. They want that when they buy from exporters like Cargill or other members of NGFA. And so if we lose the ability that the integrity and the guarantee of that certificate, I think it really hurts us as being recognized as that reliable supplier of quality grain.
Yeah. Well, we want to be the reliable quality supplier and have people excited to buy. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Hyde-Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And we know that those who buy U.S. grain, both domestically and internationally, must trust our grain inspection system functions properly. We know how important that is, and I certainly appreciate all of you willing to testify today and give us some insight on that. But this trust is a functional system, and it ensures that farmers, merchandisers, and end users all know they are operating within a system that's transparent, that is consistent, and it's science-based. I hear regularly from farmers and grain elevator operators in Mississippi who rely on the grain inspection system to protect the value of their grain and to ensure that they're competing on a level playing field with everyone else. The Grain Inspection Advisory Committee plays an important role in helping advise the Federal Grain Inspection Service navigate the technical and policy challenges of implementing the Grain Standards Act. And Mr. Bryant, I'm going to let you take this first one. I agree with your testimony that the Grain Inspection Advisory Committee serves a critical role in advising FGIS, and I appreciate your service and commitment on that committee and your enthusiasm as well. But given the technical nature of the grain standards and the weighing systems, the advisory committee's role is essential for ensuring that FGIS actions continue to facilitate the export of the world's highest quality grain grown by producers in Mississippi and across the country. Are there any recommendations you might make to improve how FGIS incorporates the advice and counsel by the advisory committee into the agency's decision-making process? Is there something that you would like to suggest today while you have our attention that we can listen to you on?
Well, thank you very much, Senator, for the question. I appreciate that. And the advisory committee is near and dear to my heart, having served 3 times and participate as a member of the public as often as possible. And it has been a great public opportunity for industry and service providers and producers for public record to talk about the needs and what we want to see the agency do. And we've seen some good work come out of that. And we have some recommendations in our testimony around how we can ensure that members are appointed to the committee in a timely manner. One of the areas that the committee has struggled with over the last handful of years is folks' term is a 3-year term limit, and they roll off, and new folks aren't nominated in time to be seated on the committee. And so we want to see some provisions around how existing members can stay on the committee until if their time expires at 3 years, until a new person has been appointed and nominated to serve and replace that person on the committee.
Yeah, it makes sense that you need that continuity, and you certainly don't need the void and the spaces there. I have a little more time left. But I'd like to highlight the importance of protecting the trade surplus in the United States has historically maintained the grain and oilseeds, but while our overall agriculture trade surplus has evaporated into what USDA now projects to be a $49 billion deficit in 2025, grain continues to be the bright spot for agriculture. And, in fact, America enjoys $65 billion of trade surplus on U.S. grains and oilseeds. Very exciting. This is a credit to our farmers who continue to grow the highest quality grain in the world, and it credits a credit to our transportation system, our infrastructure, including the critical American waterways, highways, and rail systems of how we ship this out. And it's a result of decades of diligent work to develop and to grow these markets and to protect these markets. Mississippi farmers contribute significantly to our country's grain production, particularly through crops like rice, soybeans, and corn. And these crops are exported down the Mississippi River and through the Gulf of America, let me get that right, which supports several grain transport operations in my home state. Ensuring we maintain the integrity of our inspection system is paramount importance to me, especially when it relates to our export markets. But this question is for all of you. What are some of the challenges that we face with grain exports? And what can we do in the Grain Standards Act's reauthorization to help overcome those challenges? If I'm a little bit over, but if you guys are allowed to answer that right now.
Thank you for that question. One of the things that you'll likely hear each of us talk about is the need for developing technology. And one of those reasons is down at the exports, the port locations, there's not consistency of the volume that there used to be. I remember when I was younger, we would have, it was always harvest time at harvest time. We had to staff up for that, and then usually there was natural attrition, and then you'd get through the summers. Well, because of just how the market has changed, there are a lot of ups and downs as far as volume. And one thing that we really think could help in that and maintaining consistency is bringing forth more technology within the grain inspection system so that we can rely on this technology and more consistency among people. So that's something that we think could really help.
Thank you.
The only thing that comes to mind for me is as farmers have added on-farm storage for grain, it has changed the profile of when that grain comes to market. And so if there are areas where government can target funds to help farmers in certain areas to plus up their storage, to maybe make it a little bit more predictable, and then also education for farmers, because using that storage effectively doesn't happen by accident. You do have to know what you're doing. So I think there's an educational piece there too. Thank you.
Very good points.
And I think just a timely and bipartisan reauthorization of the U.S. Grain Standard Act, it ensures that continuity and consistency of the program. And then to agree with my co-witness, Ms. McKesh, we've talked about it for a couple years now, technology. What technology can we adapt and adopt for grain grading? I think it's paramount.
What kind of technology are you referring to?
So, and I might defer to Kia, but we've been looking at a lot of different possibilities, but I think the biggest one, and frankly, I've been hearing about it since the first day I walked into Cargill over 20 years ago, and it's visual imaging technology, to be able to look at a grain sample and say, what's the level of damage?
Gotcha. Yeah, very important, and could be speed up things. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Hogan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I didn't get her right at the beginning, but I definitely want to take just a few minutes to talk about Kia from Fargo, North Dakota. What'd you do with your buddy from Grand Forks? Is he around here? Okay, there he is. Good. Okay, glad you're both here. But I want to welcome you both and just make sure that if somebody didn't bring it up sooner, that Kia is third generation in the grain inspection business, which is pretty cool. Vice president of the North Dakota Grain Inspection, but president of the American Association of Grain Inspection and Weighing Agencies at a very young age, I must say. So pretty awesome. Her grandfather, Steve Adams, began his career at North Dakota Grain Inspection shortly after its founding in 1968. And I think it's pretty awesome that you are following in your grandfather's footsteps. I'm pro-grandpas, and I'm pro-grandkids following in grandpa's footsteps. So is the chairman. You can tell by looking he's a grandpa too, right? Yeah. Just because he looks real happy, not because he looks older or anything like that. But it's so awesome that you're here, and obviously your input is very important, along with your colleagues as far as the grain inspection service. I'm actually going to shift gears a little. I thought Senator Hyde-Smith, who was in the cattle business, had great questions on the grain side. Obviously knows agriculture. But I want to ask what you all are hearing about from our farmers and our ranchers in terms of grain sales. So, you know, in our part of the world, obviously they're combining soybeans, corn, other crops. And particularly for some of the younger producers and those that are more leveraged, they have to sell right off the combine, or at least contract. And we're hearing concerns, whether it's corn or soybeans or other crops. And so just talk to us a little bit on what you're hearing in terms of them marketing those crops, and just any ideas you have along those lines to make sure that we're not only well informed, but doing whatever we can to be helpful. Kia, we get to start with you because you're from North Dakota, and then we're going to go to South Dakota out of deference to the majority leader, and then Nick, you're the cleanup hitter.
Thank
you look like a cleanup hitter, yeah, like you can put it out of the park.
Thank you so much for that question. Grain sales are not something that is within my expertise. However, what I've been very proud of that all of the grain inspection agencies like ours do is we help make sure that there is consistency in the grading that is done. So if you're in North Dakota and there's a grain elevator selling their soybeans or their corn, and it's going out to the P&W, they're needing consistency of when they're having it graded at the origin versus destination. And that's something that is paramount to make sure that you're able to sell your grain properly and give you the best outcome that you can have. So from my perspective, that's one thing that we do.
Well, I'll start, Senator Hoven, by saying I was not invited here because of my expertise on getting it right, marketing my grain every time. Some days you feel like a hero, and some days you just don't. Discussions amongst farmers about the sales that they make are sometimes, it's a difficult topic because it comes right down to how much money are you making. And when you grow up on a farm, you don't talk about that. We're taught to be very humble about things, and so when you get it right, you maybe don't talk about that, and when you really blow it, you be sure to...
An aggressive farmer is one that looks at the other guy's shoes instead of his own shoes?
Yeah, and you'll go down to the coffee shop and you're more likely to talk about the things that you've gotten wrong than right, counterintuitively. So it's sometimes hard to know exactly where my peers are at. I'm on a learning curve just like everybody else. I'm about 15 years in now as a farmer, and every year I learn something a little bit more. And basically, the thing that I try to tell younger producers is lay off as much risk as you can, because there's no shortage of uncertainty in our business. And so the ability to use futures markets, which in turn rely on the issue before the committee here today, to hedge that risk I just can't stress the importance of that enough.
But then tell me how you're marketing your crop this year.
Well, I'm probably 40 to 50% sold on my row crops.
And you did that earlier in the year?
Yes, staged out throughout the year. We're right in the middle of wheat harvest right now, so I'm not that popular with my dad, by the way, taking a quick trip to D.C. this time of year. But no, we're fine. We're selling some of that right off the combine because we're looking at a really big corn crop potentially coming in. We're going to need all the storage we have.
Are you having any trouble moving that crop?
No, I might not like the price I'm getting right now, but there's no trouble.
That's not a function of the inspection service and documents.
No, sir. No, it's just I'd love to be able to sit on it and wait for maybe a little better price, but we do see a pretty big crop coming this fall, and we're going to need all of the space on our farm available for that, just to keep the combines moving.
So you're moving the wheat right off the combine. You're not having trouble getting that contracted?
No, sir. No.
Okay. All right. But you're making room for row crop with the idea you may hold it?
Yes, and just because corn in particular is a high-volume crop, you want on-farm storage so you can keep that combine moving. If you're in line at the elevator waiting, you don't get much done in a day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Go, Nick.
So I'm not sure how the cleanup hitter is going to follow that one up.
Well, you see it directly, right, in terms of buying crop and what farmers are doing. What are you seeing?
So in my role at Cargill, I don't deal with the buying and selling. They call me when we have a problem with the quality or the Grain Standards Act or trying to manage inventory and storage. And I think that's, so when I have market questions, I candidly walk over to the trading floor and talk to them and let them handle it. But I think it is.
Last time you did that, what did they tell you?
They told me to go away. Stay in my lane. But I think that's the beauty of the U.S. Grain Standards Act, right? And Kia kind of alluded to it, as did Brandon, right? So whether it was riding in the truck with my dad to deliver to Minooka Grain and Lumber in my hometown, or when I was grading grain in Topeka, Kansas, or when I worked in New Orleans at Reserve at our export terminal, U.S. number 2 soybean was the same. U.S. number 2 was the same in Minooka, Topeka, New Orleans, and the international buyer. And that consistency, and we heard about it, that's how, you know, the international market and the domestic market uses it for price discovery. So we know it's going to be the same. And I think that's the beauty of the U.S. standards is it doesn't matter where you're at in the U.S. and for most world buyers, you know that you're getting a U.S. number 2 soybean and you've got that full backing of that Federal Grain Inspection Service certificate.
Yeah, with the indulgence, Chairman, one final question. So are we doing a good job on the consistency, and are other countries doing a good job on consistency, or is that an advantage we have in the international markets?
So I would say yes, we are doing a very good job with consistency. We think, as we've shared in our testimonies, there's some things, particularly around technology, that we could do that would help the consistency, help the efficiency. But yes, overall, I think we are doing a very good job. That's why we continue to say today and always that U.S. certificate is the gold standard. I think we're probably biased on this panel that we are better in the U.S. than our foreign competitors. And I think there's been some studies that show the value of the U.S. certificate and the U.S. Grain supply chain being reliable and consistent.
I would agree. I see that we are having consistency across the nation. However, in order to obtain that consistency, it takes a lot of time to grade that grain. So when our team members are out at grain elevators, when I was younger, I should say, I used to see where a train would take a few days to load. And that gives a lot of time for a grain inspector to sit there and pick through the grain, through each individual kernel. And now we're sitting at grain elevators that will load 115 rail cars in under 5 hours. So even if you have multiple inspectors there, there's not always a lot of space, so that's difficult as well. It is hard to keep up with the loading process. And that's where technology can come into play and help as an aid in us to be able to consistently grade that grain, and as well as help places like Cargill and farmers so that they can keep their grain moving at a fast pace.
Thanks again to all of you. Appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Well, I was just going to say, don't take my word for it. I'll tell you what I see at foreign ports when I visited there and visited with the management and the blue-collar folks unloading those vessels. I've seen the issues they deal with some of our competitors' cargoes, and they very much prefer when they're unloading a cargo from a U.S. destination. It doesn't matter whether it's the PNW, off the Gulf, off the eastern seaboard. They know they're getting that consistent product because of our grading standards.
That's really good to hear. Again, thanks to all of you.
Senator Marshall.
All right. Thank you, Chairman, and welcome to our guest today. I want to probably focus on trade for the first half. And the tariffs get all the ink, but the non-tariff barriers is my biggest concern when it comes to agriculture. And we just want to ask some questions regarding how do our grain standards help protect us from non-tariff barriers? And or do you have examples when you feel like other countries have used that against us one way or another, that they're not accepting our grading system? So maybe, Ms. Mickish, you would mind starting if you have a thought?
Thank you, Senator. Yes, from what I see in my perspective with an official grain inspection is if there are complaints overseas about any shipments of grain, it's wonderful having the FGIS and USDA backing on that. FGIS has individuals that can work through that, and since everything that we do, the paper we write on, the certificates we do, is all considered federal property. And so as those questions come through, we're able to kind of go backwards and see down to exactly when a stowage exam of looking inside a container was done and what was found during that. And I think that is something that has been very beneficial for our trading partners across the seas, that they know that they can figure out what is going on, and it's a little more difficult for that to be used when we have very good records of what happened for those shipments.
So despite that, are there examples, though, when they ignore our grading system and reject our grains?
That's something that I don't have expertise in. I apologize.
Okay, that's fine. Mr. Whip, any comments?
I had heard conversations about sometimes a foreign buyer might have become accustomed to getting maybe a little bit better than what the grade actually is, and then if you ever deliver at the grade, then they feel they have a complaint. Mm-hmm. So you say, well, okay, what were you looking for? Let's work through this. And they describe what they wanted, and you say, well, you just described number 1 corn, and you paid for number 2 corn. So it's very nice to have this grading system to fall back on and say, you want better? We have better. Let's have that conversation. And it's just that level playing field and that kind of good fences make good neighbors sort of rules that we can all agree on.
Okay. Mr. Fryant, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think we would make the case, and I, through my career, I've dealt with non-tariff trade barriers. We make the case that's why we have the U.S. grain standards, right? The U.S. grain standards help address some of those concerns, whether it's damage or insects or other quality factors. That's why we have them. And I think Ms. Mikesh made a great point. We've got that backing. If there is a complaint from a foreign buyer, there's an official process. FGIS gets involved, and they relook at the sample and provide an official report or a formal report. And in my experience, almost every single time, we proved that we loaded what we said we were going to load, and the quality met what the buyer was expecting to get.
Okay. With the time I have remaining, I want to kind of put on my MAHA hat here and give you all a chance to brag too. I think there's a misconception out there that we're not testing grain, that we're not testing what we milled for pesticides. Let's talk, maybe focus on pesticides for a second. I think that's the biggest concerns. Just describe what we're doing and what those standards look like. What type of reassurance would you give my daughter, the mother of my 2 grandsons, that American grain is safe? And maybe go in reverse order. Mr. Bryant, go first, perhaps.
Sure, and I would start with, I eat the products made out of the grain. I'm happy to feed them to my family, and my daughter's here today without.
So far, so good?
Yeah, and I think so. We have a really strong system here, right? EPA regulates, FDA enforces, and we have strong programs to ensure that proper residue limits are set and they're monitored, and we don't see those in our supply chain.
Okay. Mr. Whip.
Yes. So my role as the farmer is really to understand the pesticide labels, make sure that I'm applying those right, and then to every extent that I can, invest in the latest technology so that I'm able to apply timely and properly. And as long as I'm doing that, that's kind of the last stage I have in it. But I stand behind every bushel that I produce.
Then you take it to the elevator. I'm going to say elevator. Maybe you take it different places, and the grain is tested there for residues.
I don't believe each load. I'm not really sure at what point that happens. The ticket I get when I dump a truck of grain mainly deals with moisture, maybe protein content, mainly things that deal with, will this grain spoil too quickly, or will it stay in condition until it gets to the end customer?
Right.
Perhaps there's somebody better than me to address your question.
Thank you for that question. That's something that I'm very passionate about as far as making sure that the quality of our grain is there. Some of the factors that we look for that are important in respect to what you're discussing is mycotoxins. So making sure that corn doesn't have aflatoxin or vomitoxin in it, or our wheat doesn't have ergot or vomitoxin, or many other factors where they are safety factors to make sure that either the end consumer, whether that is a human or a cattle, or is going to be okay and be healthy through that. I think that one of the things that I see is that, I spoke a little bit in my testimony that exports are mandated to have quality inspection, but nothing domestically is. And so our entire official agency is done on mainly permissive work. And so even though it isn't mandated under the Grain Standards Act that the grain at an elevator in Castleton, North Dakota is done, the whole entire system finds that essentially mandatory in their own right. And so the buyers will require the sellers to provide them with heavy testing. We have grades on every single rail car that go out that show those different damages that can be very toxic. Some of them can be, but then also doing mycotoxins on every rail car. And I think that shows the commitment to safety in the industry.
Are you testing for pesticides as well?
We are not testing for pesticides. That does go to a different level. Grain inspections, we do more of the quicker analysis that they can do to buy and sell, but I know that FGIS does pesticide residue testing as well as other private agencies.
Okay, right. Mr. Freon, you want to add something? Nope, okay. Thank you so much, Chairman.
Mrs. Mickish, your testimony highlights the request for official agencies to take part in research activities. As the Vice President of an official agency, can you speak to the impact this clarification would have on your family's business and the inspection system as a whole?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, we have seen over the years that FGIS has worked very hard to help get technology going, but it is a difficult process. Nick and I, a few years back, went to an agricultural marketing summit, Marketing Services Innovation Summit, and we were there with fruits and vegetables and organics, and everyone else was having a little bit easier of a time finding technology to help aid in their inspection process. And when people think that you're in your isolated area and you feel maybe that you're a unicorn, everything is a lot more difficult for our area. We found that for grain, that was definitely true. When you're looking at a tomato, you can see things pretty visibly, whereas we're looking at tiny little kernels and looking at them individually per sample we do for a rail car. So with that, there is a lot that has been going on in technology, and there is definitely a bottleneck in having the federal government do all of the testing or all of the analysis on it to determine if something is fit for purpose. So one of the things that we discuss in the advisory committee is, new technologies will come through, but you always have to make sure that it is the same or better. And that is difficult to do and takes a lot of time. So one of the things that we have discussed is that official agencies could take on some of that in the beginning, let's say 80 to 90%. And when I was talking about mycotoxins earlier, that's where you've seen the most evolution in technology, is things that there is a great scientific base that is outside of the official agency's purview as well. Whereas when you're talking about visual grading, that is something that there are very few that are experts in, FGIS being one, as well as official agencies. So we think that official agencies would be able to take on a lot of that and help escalate the timeliness of getting technology improved, as well as being able to see a lot of real-life examples that happen right away instead of figuring it out when something is already approved. Our agency provides service in 9 states. That's a lot of different types of damages, different types of corn, soybeans, and different geographical environments. And we think that that would be an added benefit for official agencies to help as well.
Very good. Mr. Whiff, you outlined the successful and swift action by FGIS and stakeholders to remedy the soybeans of other color issue a few years ago. Can you speak to the need for this process to be adaptable to new seed technologies that maintain the expectation of consistency and quality worldwide?
Yes, so to me, that situation that I highlighted with the soybeans of other color, it just shows us that the system worked. It's robust enough to deal with a curveball we hadn't seen before, maybe, and luckily we were able to work through that process, and very grateful that we were able to do so and that nothing was disrupted for the farmers. I think it's important that we continue to offer that flexibility because of the unknown unknowns. We don't know maybe what the next sort of similar situation might be, but I'm grateful that the system worked.
Very good. Mr. Bryant, you served many years on the Grain Inspection Advisory Committee. Can you share additional insight in the importance of the advisory committee and if the committee has tried to tackle some of the priorities you raised today?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I appreciate that question. And very much so, the advisory committee has served a really important function for the agency and then for industry, producers, official agencies, as I mentioned previously, that public forum to have the conversations and for FGIS to hear from stakeholders, what do we need? And I think one really good success story, and I want to thank Senator Hyde-Smith and Senator Hoeven had to leave, dealing with FDA actionable grain. And that was something that the committee brought, the committee brought to the agency and said, here's some concerns, here's some changes we would like to see happen. FGIS took those recommendations from the committee back, worked with FDA, and then, as I mentioned, the support from Senator Hyde-Smith and Senator Hoeven to help the process along, and we ended up with some new directives and direction that has made it significantly easier for the industry to manage. So really, truly a good success story of how that advisory committee worked, and the agency took what was recommended and turned it into something actionable for the industry.
Very good. Senator Hyde-Smith, have you got any other questions or comments? Well, thank you again, witnesses, for being here. You did a tremendous job, and this was very, very helpful. This helps us understand how important it is for us to get our work done and get this reauthorized. we do appreciate the fact that you took time, especially when it brings you out of the field and things like that. Tell your daddy I'm sorry. And the record will remain open for 5 business days. Again, thanks always to all of the staff that worked so hard to make this happen on both sides. And with that, the hearing's adjourned.